Okay, so I just hit recording in progress. Did you hear that, Pat?
I did.
Okay, we're good to go. So, we're trying to get a little bit higher energy at the beginning of these videos. So this is Pat. Pat teaches at Pat. What's the name of yours? Well, where in the world are you, Pat? You don't have to dox
Uh,
yourself.
so I teach at St. Mark's School in Southborough, Massachusetts,
Nice. Well, that's very specific. In Southborough, I'm in Boston, or Cambridge. Where is that?
just west of Framingham.
Okay, so a little bit out there. A little bit out there. So Pat, the way that Pat and I both did the same master's program in digital literacy and computer science, which feels, I don't know if does it feel like it was yesterday, or does it feel like it was like 10 years ago? Because it
I
wasn't
would
10 years
say
ago.
closer to yesterday.
Say it again.
I think for me, maybe a little closer to yesterday. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. I mean, it really wasn't 4 years
There's
ago.
aspects of it that feel like forever ago. I don't know, like because we were in almost all the same classes together. And so like learning about like the teenage adolescent mind or whatever, that to me does feel closer to like infinity ago. But then when we finally moved in person and had that class where we did like the makerspace stuff and like did microbits or whatever, that feels a bit more recent. Maybe for me, because like in the middle of that program, right, I started teaching as a long-term sub, like in March of that year. So like that's when everything turned around for me. So basically anything before then feels like a million years ago. And then once it's stuff that I was doing while I was teaching, it feels a little bit more close to home. What were your pros and cons of the program? I actually if you don't remember, I'm gonna bring up something that I remember that happened to you.
Oh boy. I guess we should plug Leslie University
Yeah, I
here.
mean it wasn't like for what it's worth, it wasn't bad. Like I had a good time. Everyone
You
was
know,
there pretty nice.
I thought the all of the core education classes that I took were fantastic, and I think I really appreciate Leslie's approach to student-centered learning, and I felt like I was very well prepared to be a classroom high school teacher, based on what I learned in those classes. With regard to the, digital literacy aspects and the computer science aspects, I think maybe there were some, I think that was sort of a new thing for them and they were just kind of getting that going. And, we were somewhat of an experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough at like because it's a very small school, right? Like they don't have a huge computer science staff, and like it was all remote, right? I feel like it would have been a lot different if we were in person. So like there were some challenges, but there's one that I want to bring up because Pickcode would have solved it. Do you remember our Python class? And you were like, you told me, I don't know if it was over email or in a Zoom session or something. You were like, Charlie, it took me like 36 hours to figure out how to run my first line of Python code because like I just got down this like super terrible rabbit hole. Do you remember what happened?
I do, I believe I was trying to use GitHub to run code.
Yeah. They have a thing now. But it's not easy to use. And I think it was like when you tried it, it was before they even had that.
Yes.
You were like, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know who would be watching this video and knows what this means, but you were in the buttons for a while. You were like trying to set up GitHub Actions. So you were like, I'm going to edit the code inside of the GitHub code editor, and then I'm going to have a GitHub action that runs the Python. But then like you couldn't see the output.
Yep.
Like you were doing something that like a large software engineering company should set up, not a person trying to write their first 50 lines of Python.
Right. Or
Or
just hello
accidentally.
world.
Yeah, basically, yeah. You were I think the assignment that week was like turn in a screenshot of you running Hello World or something like that. And you were like, this took me 48 hours and I basically want to quit now. So that's yeah. So I mean there were challenges there, right? That wouldn't have happened if we were in person.
Or correct. Or if we had pick code.
Or if we had Pickcode, nice little websites to run code are always good. And the other challenge, right, is that people come in with different backgrounds, right? Like I have a software engineering background, and so I was like, okay, I'll run my Python code wherever. But then, so how did you find yourself deciding to, because you wanted to get into teaching? I mean, you clearly have a passion for teaching. what was the decision about computer science in particular? Like you must have seen some, how did that happen?
I think I was interested because it seemed like an emerging area of education that, I wanted to be a part of. I do, this is, not my first career or my second career. Way back when I was a project manager and a financial system software for like Putnam Investments. So I had I was not a software developer. I was much more of an analyst, project manager, but that was my sort of computer science background.
But you have serious Excel skills then.
It was, more relational database skills. I ran an Oracle database for quantitative analysts and portfolio managers.
So you're actually probably then, so if it had been do Hello World and SQL, you would have been like, yeah,
Oh, I could, select, from where all day long. Yes.
exactly. Well, that's interesting. So you found the Leslie site somehow, or you were researching stuff, and then you started. Did you do like, because we had a student teaching thing. Did you do that as a traditional student teaching, or did you do that while you were paid?
No, I did that as a traditional. So when we were, I think, doing that like makers class, I was probably in my pre-practicum at Weston High School.
Got it. Okay, so you actually did get placed at an actual,
I
and so
did.
that probably because I like jumped into it. I just went and I was a teacher, and like the advisor for the program, she's super nice, but like she'd come and observe me 3 times, and that was it. That was like all the help I got, which was a little bit diving into the deep end. But so you were able to hang out. What did they teach at Weston? How did they do that?
I was able to sit in on two sections of APCSA.
Cool.
So
And so
that was great. And then I continued there in for the second semester full time for my practicum.
got it. And so then you eventually like took over some lessons or a unit or something like that, or
Yes, a unit on sorting algorithms, which I actually just ran in my Java class now. I still use
you
elements of that.
you kept the lesson.
Yeah.
Can I admit that in my long teaching career and in my exactly 1 year of teaching CSA, that I skipped sorting. I determined through guesswork and my knowledge of the question bank that there were like no questions on sorting. I was like, this is kind of complicated. Like in my CS degree, we didn't learn about those until the second semester. And so I was like, you know what? We're just not going to do it. And I don't think like the kids after the exam didn't tell me that they like were totally hosed by having a bunch of questions on sorting. I already admitted to this in another one of these interviews with teachers. I skipped sorting, so I skipped recursion, and I basically skipped inheritance. Um,
Oh,
I didn't like skip. I introduced them lightly. I was like, there are practice problems available if you would like to try and use that as a way to improve your score if you are very confident on the other stuff. Otherwise, go back and review loops and arrays because that's a higher percentage of the test.
yeah. I think inheritance is a pretty big part of it, because there's always there's usually a FRQ. That's one of the four categories.
Okay, if there's an FRQ on inheritance, then I might be lying because if there was an FRQ, I would not have skipped it. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the four categories. And I'm guessing that you probably had to do inheritance because that's a pretty big unit.
Yeah.
Um, I use Minesweeper to introduce recursion now.
Okay, well, how does it? I mean, I imagine the audience of these videos are reasonably technical. How does the Minesweeper recursion lesson? How does that work?
When you have to check adjacent squares, you call the, sort of square checker logic, and then it does the whole like, when it blows out all the empty, spaces that it can, it's just checking adjacent squares
We need
recursively.
to we need to hack into Microsoft and see if that's actually how the actual game is implemented.
I
What?
can send you the job. I can send you, I mean, we just do a text version of it.
Yeah, yeah. So you're going to run the text version of Minesweeper in Pickcode.
So I'm not using Pickcode for Java right now. I'm still we're using Eclipse for Java. There are times where I've, maybe regretted that choice this year.
Yeah, well, so what are the pros and cons? Because like when it gets up to CSA, I mean, a lot of people do use Pickcode for CSA for the teacher features and the history view and the student dashboard and the work and the starter code and all of that. But there is some benefit to the students getting exposed to a real IDE with real files and all of that. So, I mean, it sounds like you run some classes with and some without. Like, what do you see the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think that to a certain extent, Pickcode was a bit of an unknown, commodity when I started this year. And, I'd always used online editors for my computer science 1 and 2 classes, which are based on Python. Although, we usually had, transitioned to PyCharm during the year at some point, because most of the online editors would, struggle with graphics. And I had just always used, Eclipse for my Java class. So it's kind of, I just sort of, stayed with it. And, those students have more of a technical background to be in that class, so, it's not as heavy of a lift to like, manage files and things like that. And
So you
so
guys have some prerequisite for CSA.
we do.
Okay, so that's a little different, right? Because like some schools, CSA might be the only course that they offer. So this is like a student's first ever introduction to programming. Um,
Yep.
so
That's
I
the
think
way it
it
was
just,
at
I mean,
Weston. And for, full disclosure, we do not, it is not an AP class. We do not have, we're not an AP school. So it's called computer programming with Java. And, but I use the AP curriculum, and we do, allow kids to take the AP test after taking that class.
okay, so essentially AP, except the course catalog doesn't say it.
And I don't like drill them on multiple choice. It's more project-based learning. So it's like, I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah, that's cool. That's
but
cool.
we do like, I support, like, we practice FRQs and things like that in different ways.
So then how many classes do you have total? So you have CS1, CS2, and then the Java thing.
Yeah, so I have, a couple sections of, so CS 1 and 2 run, as semester classes. So it's really intro to computer science kind of thing. And I have 2 sections of those. I have one Java class, and then I have an advanced topics class, which is, an interesting one, that I sort of came up with, called project management and development, where it's about the ongoing support of a, application for the school called Lion Link.
Okay, well, so I should go visit that class because like they can learn about what it's like in the real life when they got customers like Pat at 7:30 at night saying the code won't run. I saw that email today. I was looking through for some other reason. I was like searching through all of the different support tickets that we had received. And that was a dark time. I remember that. It was right around winter break, and like we had switched something up with Turtle, or something had changed on our end, and you were trying to run graphics programs, and like we kept on. I've mentioned it a few times on the YouTube channel. So for someone who's watched this 100 times, I won't go over too much, but like we have the system that pages us if the site's not working. And like that week in particular, we just kind of kept getting these calls, and we were having some issues with all of the servers and everything. And that was not a fun. I hate seeing those sorts of emails like at because it's like you basically have to fix it, right? I mean, like the students have got to do the work. So
And you did. So thank you. And I
no,
appreciate, the support. And that's one of the things, that I like about Pickcode. Now, my expectation isn't that I have a personal relationship with every application, owner that I work with, but I do appreciate that there's someone there to respond when there's an issue, or even if it's just a like, hey, it would be nice if I could do X, and you are very responsive, and that's appreciated.
Yeah, I mean that's always the goal. Because we've kind of like, you know, Pickcode, the initial first 100 things we wanted to do were basically, I was like, what would I want if I was in the classroom? Let's build that, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to work for a lot of people. But now we're kind of out of easy ideas. Like we've kind of, so now it's really, it has to be ideas that teachers are telling us, hey, here's this thing that we want to do. I don't know, maybe you were one of the people who asked for it, or maybe you weren't, but it wasn't obvious to me. It didn't totally click like, oh, we need folders for the lessons. Because I wasn't in there running the thing, running my classroom in there with 100 lessons that need to be organized into folders. I just, we built the software and I was like, oh, the lesson thing works and we're good to go. So, you listen to that. I mean, a few people say, hey, we need folders for the lessons. And hopefully you found that there are folders for the lessons.
I have not used the folders feature
Oh,
yet.
no.
And
How
I
many
just
lessons do you
learned,
have?
what's that?
How many
I have a
lessons
lot.
do you?
I have a lot, but they're, it's like they're sort of in order. So I just sort of ignore the ones at the bottom of the list and I'm dealing with the ones on the top of the list. So it's not a problem.
Well, some people are more like to get their five ducks in a row or something. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe in the future that would be helpful, and I'll have to check. I watched your last video and I learned about the increased font size.
Oh, there you go. So you are, yeah. I mean, so these videos will be announced to the world on my LinkedIn week by week. But in reality, I'm not wearing the exact same shirt and outfit. I just wear the same outerwear, and I'm always wearing a gray t-shirt. So I didn't do them all in a row, but that was Monday. Today's Thursday. I'm probably going to send this video out in April. People will still see it on YouTube. I'm just going to put it on YouTube, but the vast majority of the views will come later. Regardless, you're the first person to be on the show, quote unquote, who's seen an existing episode. So
Yeah, I wanted to be
yes,
prepared.
the font size thing was a big deal. Also, that maybe you know that this question is about to arrive. What are the things on your wish list that we should be working on? Do you have
You
stuff?
know, I, I think I've been, I'm pretty satisfied with the way things are working. I think that, I would say anything to further support, graphics, especially like, our stuff, the stuff that I do in Pygame and, making it so that, it's smoother, that it can, handle more complex, games. We'll see, so far things have been working, well, and it's been able to, we finished a Pong project and that worked. Now we're using lists to represent drawing objects. And, that's working, okay so far. Next up is Angry Birds. So we'll be, loading image, doing more with loading image files into, and which we've done a little bit with, and that's worked out okay, but we'll be using lists to represent, Angry Bird targets and things like that. So we'll see how it handles that load. You know, I think you probably know I used to use Replit. Replit could not handle that load.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and we that would always be by now in the year I would have moved everybody to PyCharm.
Yeah. Well, at least you have that kind of like escape hatch or whatever, right? Which is like if you run into some day where Pickcode ends up to be extremely frustrating, we have not created the world's most bulletproof piece of software. I'm sure, like, you get 300 megabytes of RAM for your project. If you need 305 megabytes of RAM, your thing's going to crash. And so for 99% of people, that's the right balance of us between costs and what people generally need. We haven't received complaints, but like it's good that if someone wants to have 1,000 different things going and it gets too slow or whatever on Pickcode, that you could have that student go and use PyCharm, something like that. And you can download a zip file of your project, so you should be able to just download the zip, throw it in PyCharm, and be good to go. That's certainly something that I believe is like Pickcode should not be the student's last IDE, right? It's like
What
this
do
is
you
a
mean?
nice place
Wait
to
a
get
second.
started. It's a nice place to get
That's what
started.
I
It has
signed
a
up for here.
right. It has the button is very nice, the green button, right? We love that, but Yeah, it's it has as many features as it has. And like one of the things, we're not going to change that. We're not going to add a whole bunch of other stuff because that's kind of what I've heard from most people. It's like that's kind of the good thing about it is that there isn't too many things going on in there.
Yeah,
So, you want to do something crazy, go do PyCharm or VS Code or whatever you want to do.
right.
It's kind of our take. So it's the graphics stuff. Do you want sounds in graphics?
I think that that would be yes. I think sound effects would be useful in the future. That's like sometimes especially for Angry Birds, having like the wee is a useful feature. That's
No,
not a
yeah, just warning, right? It does not work. You cannot use sounds.
okay.
So I tried one day. I had it on my to-do list. I was like, we want sounds in Pygame because it'd be cool. And I used the tools available to me to try and get that figured out. And it was like basically going to be rather complicated to figure out and like a little bit not beyond my pay grade, but I was like, I'm not going to be able to get this done in like a couple days worth of work. It's going to be more of a project. No one's really like banging down the door for this. We got other priorities, so it got shelved. But I got about 3 hours into adding sounds before it was clear that it was not going to be an easy project. Um,
Okay, that's good to know. I haven't tried that yet, and now I won't.
I
And
know
it's
I don't
not
know how to
a
communicate that to people, like, because I don't want people to be bummed out, right? Like they go to all the trouble to add this cool lesson, and they've got all the instructions, and then the sounds don't work, right? So that's always a challenge with a coding sandbox environment, right? Is there's going to be some limitations, so
sure.
we have to find some way to communicate that to people. Um, okay. So wish list is really just you want to make sure graphics works well.
Yeah, I think that would be, useful. Like there, some little like cosmetic things that are not like a big deal. Like, on my, if I assign a lesson to a class, like I created new classes for the second semester, but like when I still see in this like, student work view, I'll still see the old classes show up, you know,
Well, so this is why I ask these questions because sometimes we actually have solutions. You can archive the old classes.
if I archive the old classes, then they won't show up anymore. Okay, there
And
we
they'll
go.
just go into a tab in your classes menu called archived classes. You can always go get them back if you need to.
Hmm.
It just flips a Boolean, us programmers may know,
Yeah.
archived true. And if it's archived, it goes into that little pile. All the rest of the data is still there.
Okay. I have been like it's not a big deal, so I've held off on emailing you about that one because I don't want to be, a difficult customer.
No, I mean, but it's a reasonable thing. That was crazy. There was, I mean, when we had to add that, there was a person who used Pickcode for a few months last year. That was when we first were getting started out with any school ever using it at all. And summer rolled over and they were like, I need to archive a class. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this thing has been used 2 years in a row. Like we actually just didn't occur to me the first time we built it that people might use it 2 years in a row and they might need to archive their classes. So yeah, that it does exist. It's just you click the class and it's one of the options. So there you go. Well, we problem solved there.
There
That's
we go. Well, amazing service.
yeah. You just have to get on a weird half-hour call with me in the middle of the day, and that's how you get your questions answered. What's it called? So maybe another question, because you actually do that. You should have a good answer to this. What's the coolest thing you've seen students do inside of Pickcode? I mean, you've got them doing all of these crazy graphics things. Do you have any standout projects that you remember? Not to
You
put you on the
know,
spot. If you can't think of one, just lie.
no, I've seen some, I've seen some interesting, some kids like push themselves, you know, pretty hard. I try to give them, opportunities to be creative. And, a lot of times there'll be a like, a requirement on an assignment that is to create some sort of special feature. So we'll have the Pong game, but then you need to add some feature that makes your Pong game special. And, I had one student that, incorporated all these interesting like math, like sine and cosine and, angle functions into their project. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Um, another student, we were doing a sort of one in a project to introduce working with lists where we, create sort of a simple dice game, and a student, made like a pretty cool Yahtzee scoring system, which
Nice.
was well done, including like the computer logic, for, keeping, going for, like, Yahtzee, and like it was sort of limited to the like top section of the Yahtzee board, but still it was like, all right, that's pretty good stuff for a computer science, you know, first semester computer science high school class.
So maybe this speaks to a character flaw of mine. But as soon as I heard Yahtzee and Python, you're talking about this student doing something cool and going above and beyond. I just wanted to brag. I just want to brag about my own Yahtzee and Python game, which also incorporated SQL, by the way. So it's the best of both worlds. It's on GitHub. I don't know if you ever want to look at it. It's called Yachts. I don't know how I spelled it, but like Yahtzee SQL. I use SQL to generate all of the tables of probabilities for the dice rolls.
Okay.
And then I like when the computer wanted to go and decide on what its next roll was, it would like select from the probabilities and do a group by and pick the best one. Um, and it actually performed reasonably well. It would get like 200s, uh,
Okay.
which is like not a great score, but like it's a pretty good score. So sorry to overshadow
No,
that
no, that's
too, but
good. No,
and it did a lower section too. Okay, it didn't just do the upper section. Mine was doing Full House and the real deal. Um, Programming is fun, right?
yes. Well, that's the idea, is that like if we can come up with assignments that make, like students, become motivated by wanting to make something, the idea is that sort of like homework can transition into home play, and then they end up getting a lot more practice than they normally would because they're so motivated to make, that game or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we're on the same page. Like you went through the same program that I did. It never occurred to you to do an auto-graded canned curriculum,
No,
right? Like it
no.
didn't even cross your mind for a moment. So I mean, I think they did a good job in that regard, right? My school had purchased for like us like a curriculum that wasn't canned for what it's worth. It was like an open-ended thing. It was like they're reasonably good projects to pull from. But yeah, never occurred to, and so like that's who we end up talking to, right? Is like we don't offer any curriculum. So everyone we talk to is kind of on the same page as me as like we're do and you of like we want to help students do creative stuff. Like that's the goal. Um, and like I think you would kind of agree that coding is closer to art class than math class, right? It's like so somehow we both got that message through the program that we went through, right?
Absolutely. It's like, and in fact, like that's sort of my hook, is to try to, get it so that a wide range of students feel like, hey, computer science might be something that I can do. And like that's a space that I can belong to. And you giving them and sort of showing them that like, the goal of my, intro to computer science class is not to become a great programmer, but to like understand that like, programming languages are tools to express your own or explore your own interests, and like, whether it be, music or, art or whatever, games, that, these are things that I'm interested in, and now I can do them on my own using these tools, and not like, you know, I'm here to be a good programmer. Then they get into it, and then they take the Java class, which is much more, okay, now we're going to learn programming skills. And
Yeah. Well, that's kind of we've left ourselves on a sort of inspiring note. Do we have any last thoughts or questions? Because that was kind of we that felt like we just said something kind of eloquent, and I like it.
no, I just, again, I think, Pickcode has been a great tool. I appreciate, that it's a, it's designed for educators and that you thought of us teachers intentionally when you created this platform and that, comes through for me and is why that I've really enjoyed using it. So thanks for that.
Sweet. Well, okay. That is a very good place to end it off. So I'm gonna thank you for the kind words. I'm gonna hit stop recording and then I'm gonna thank you a second time. Cool. All right, I'm hitting stop now.